My computer is being so stupid today. You ever have those days where your computer just it's always freezing? Anyway, it's one of those days. So, um, here I am with another book review. This time, uh, we're doing a classic, and that is Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. I never realized they were so long until I checked it out of the library. But look at that big, decent, fat book. Some of this is notes. It's got a nice glossary in the back for all the Middle English words. Because this edition, and you can see, look at the beautiful cover. This is a Penguin edition. Look at a beautiful cover. And on that cover this is a manuscript of Chaucer and in original manuscript, and you can see this. You can see it is not written in Old English letters, like Old English font we have now. You can see that the medieval writing, you can't even read that, okay? I mean, this word, and these ones with the little curves above the word, almost reminds me of Indian writing. And you can also see that, I don't understand why Hollywood and people get the authentic look of things so wrong. But you can see this man is wearing a medieval head covering that goes all the way down to the back of his to his back, and you can see the horse. I love how the way medieval people pictured animals. Uh, it's almost like he has it's like a cartoon character with a mischievous look on his face. You can see that he's got this like kind of mischievous look. Okay, so now we'll get to the book. So, uh, I'm doing book reviews, but some of this might be a lecture. I can't lecture on Chaucer. Some of my channel may be a lecture, but I cannot lecture on Chaucer. I can lecture on the Greek classics and probably other subjects like painting, poetry. Well, not as much poetry, but I can lecture about Homer and Greek classics. So maybe how to write poetry, lyric poetry. I'll read some of my poetry online to show you I'm an amateur. Only an amateur in that poetry is not how I make my living. So, Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, or Canterbury was how it was spelled then. The Canterbury Tales. This is actually a delightful book. It's about a pilgrimage to the Canterbury Cathedral, which, as you know, is now the highest church in the Anglican Church. But when this was written, it was before the time of Henry VIII, so it would have been a Catholic church at this time. But there was no Anglican Church. England was still Catholic. Um, but it was a site of pilgrimage, and I forget his name, but the king had, I think it was the bishop. I think it was the bishop. The king had the Bishop of Canterbury murdered, and slowly this guy started to become a saint, and people would do a pilgrimage to Canterbury to see the shrine of this murdered man. Not sure why he became so popular, but that's the way it was. And I really should do more research if I'm going to talk about it. But it's about a group of people who are setting out on a journey to the cathedral. Now, I mean, you can just find another Cliff Notes summary of it somewhere else, but um, this edition, which I'm reviewing, is in Middle English, so you have to be able to read it and understand it in and translate it into modern English. This is not a translation of Middle English, but as you can see, you know, it actually is not too hard. It's not too hard. It isn't too hard for me. You'll see that the first line says under general prologue, which general prologue, I don't think it was. Not sure if it was spelt that way. Not sure. It says, when the April with his surest suit, or that's at least how I would pronounce this. Okay, so I'll do a reading of this first page. When the April with his surest suit, the drucht of March hath pierced to the root, and bathed every vein in sweet liquor, of which virtue engendered is the flower. When Zephyrus eke with his sweet breath inspired hath in every holt and heath the tender crops, and the young sun hath in the ram his have course erown, and the small fowls making melody, that slepen all the night with open eye, so pricketh him nature in her courages, then longen folk to goon on pilgrimages, and palmeres for to second strons, to fern hawks and quoth in sundry Londis, and especially from every shire's end of England to Canterbury they went. They wend. The holy blissful martyr for to seek that hem hath holpen won that they were seek. Befell that in that season on a day in Southwark at the tabard as I lay, ready to wenden on my pilgrimage to Canterbury with full devout courage. At night was come into that hostelry, well 9 and 20 on in a company of sundry folk by adventure Efalla in fellowship, and pilgrims were they all, that toward Canterbury Walden stride. So one difference between this and modern English is that not only is the spelling sometimes different, like when is wan with an A. One big difference is that the verbs are a bit different. So hath Hath is the third person of have. So it's I have, you hast, and then he hath. Not you have, you have, you have. Da, 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 da. Okay. So, that's right. So the verb call would have an E on the end. A lot of times words have an E on the end where they don't in modern English. So the verb I call with an E on the end would be I call, thou. They use thou, not you, I think. Thou callest. Est is the second person. And the third person is eth. So it's calleth. He calleth. And the plural is we, ye, ye for you plural, and they call and n is in parentheses, meaning it's optional. So call in, they call in for they call. Uh, the present participle ends in ing, so like it's calling with a calling with an e on the end, which is also optional. The past tense would be is formed in two ways. There's the weak way and then there's the strong way. The the weak way is means that they add an ed on the stem and they keep the stem the same, which I would think is a strong stem, not a weak stem, but they're calling it weak here. I think it's backwards because in other languages they say a strong aorist is, well, I'll look it up. So the weak form is khalid, with an e in parentheses, khalida or khalid, khalidest, khalidest, or past tense you khalidest would be you called. And the third person is the same as the first. It is he khaleda, e optional at the end. Now a strong, this is what they call a strong verb, modifies the stem but does not put ed on the end. So you would say I sang or song. I song is an option for sing in the past tense. Then second person thou songe, and the third person he sang or he song with o, a second o in song in parentheses, meaning it is optional. In the plural, it is songen or songa. So the end is the n on the end is optional for we songen or we songa. And that's the same for the second and the third person. So ye, which is you plural, ye songen or they songen. And the past participle is the one that will be probably the most different and will look the most different from you, and you will need to be told what it is in order to understand Chaucer. Because you'll see this a lot. And be like, what the heck is that? It looks like a normal word, but why is there a Y in the front? Okay, so the past tense is Y. Now the Y is optional, but you will see it all the time. You'll see it on just about, I think you'll probably see it on every page in Chaucer. This is the past participle. So the past participle is like a man called this. Well, in Chaucer, we would say a man ye called. So a Y in front, you'll see Y, the letter Y, called. Ye called would be the past participle for called. So we'd say a man ye called this. So and the past participle for the strong verb sing would be isongen and optional. So you'd say uh what is the past participle of sing would be for us sung. It must have come from song, songa. So isongen, a song. So we would say a song was sung, right? So here what we say, or a song sung at Christmas. We would say in Chaucer it would be a song isongen at Christmas. A song isongen at Michaelmas. If they had Michaelmas at this time. I should know these things. Alright, so I'm not gonna do the whole grammar, but that's the biggest difference. One is isongen, is the past participle. You'll see it all the time. So, this is a great classic for you to be familiar with. And it's a great story. People have people have used often classic books to write new books nowadays. They use it to write other books now. They use it to write science fiction. Um, yeah, well, I mean, the main examples I'll give is science fiction. So when they did the movie Forbidden Planet, which some of you will probably think it's like a mystery science theater movie, but in fact, it was an important science fiction movie in its day in the 1950s, and you know, perhaps it's shown its age, but we can get beyond that. They used the basic framework of the Tempest for that that movie, and you can do this too. You can take a play, let's say Macbeth. Why don't you take a play like Macbeth and write a fantasy book based on Macbeth? It's going to be a bloody one, and Game of Thrones. So grimdark is in style. Grimdark is in fashion ever since that became the most successful show on earth. It was a well-made show, I have to say. Still, I don't know why that's most. I still don't really understand why that is the most popular show on earth. I have to say, nothing else is really coming out with that kind of quality in the genre and in TV in general. To me, I think they make some good detective shows. Maybe, I mean, Broken Wood, which is made in New Zealand, comes to mind, but I wouldn't put Broken Wood in a classic status with, you know, uh, you can't put Broken Wood. For me, you couldn't put Broken Wood as like Poirot or a real classic mystery series like Columbo or anything great. It's good. It's a good B series. For me, it's a good B. But I haven't watched it entirely in a long time. I got season. I should do my own review on this. This should be another video. But where is it? Are you telling me? I can't find it. I can't find it. I can't find it. Oh, there it is. Broken Wood. All right. what was I saying? I don't understand why Game of Thrones is the most successful TV show on earth. Doesn't make any sense to me. But there it is. So you could take Macbeth and write a fantasy story based on Macbeth. Grimdark is in. There you go. Bloody story. What's another example? Oh yeah, Canterbury Tales itself. So what we were talking about. So Canterbury Tales, you could take and make a science fiction story, and someone did. It's um, which I haven't read, and I honestly don't know if I'm going to because it's not high on the list of priorities. But it's Dan Simmons's Endymion, and I actually remember in the bookstore when this series was either coming out or when it was on sale. And I always wondered about it because it had such. I was actually a classics kid. I wanted to learn Latin when I was in. I wanted to learn Latin when I was in eighth grade, and partly it's because Latin was in all this stuff that I guess I liked or watched. I can't remember. Like one of the shows that I watched when I was a kid was uh, The Wind in the Willows. Yes, that's it. So in The Wind in the Willows, Mr. Badger, I think it's Mr. Badger, uh, and I want to say that he's like Owl and Winnie the Pooh, but I don't remember. But I think Mr. Badger had a Latin dictionary. And I had always heard about Latin, and I grew up Catholic, so in the mass, we knew that it used to be in Latin, and I think C.S. Lewis, Narnia. I don't remember reading all of those books, to be honest. I don't remember liking C.S. Lewis, but still, I read some of them, and I used to watch the show, which was on in the 90s when I was a kid. And it had like Latin phrases in it, and so did lots of other things. So when I was in eighth grade, what I wanted to do was learn Latin. And so I was a classics kid, and this interest, of course, has been my whole life. But God, how did we get onto that? Oh yeah, Endymion. So the cover says Endymion, so I'm like, well, that's such a mysterious sounding name, isn't it? Like Endymion, like it's so airy. Well, this must be a good book. But I never got about reading it. So, anyways, that book in format. Well, no, not in not Endymion. It's what's the first book in that series called? With the Shrike, Stan Simmons, um, Hyperion, Hyperion Cantos, right? That's Latin. So he based Hyperion, the first book, on the Canterbury Tales. So in the book Canterbury Tales, what happens is, you can watch another video for Cliff Notes, but a bunch of people get together for this pilgrimage, and I think they tell a story. Each one of them tells a story. So you can use these classic stories in your own writing. You don't just have to come up with a new story. I don't want to say this because it seems like it's going to create laziness or mislead people into thinking that they could just always copy something else, which I think you often do when you start writing, because both for the reason that you can't think of anything on your own, and for the reason that you probably started writing because you love all of these stories. So you want to do your own version of this. You want to do your own version of that. You want to do your own version of this. So you're probably going to want to do a lot of copying. But then when you start to develop your own mind, when you get to the point where you're actually maturing, doing the best stuff that you could do as a writer, you'll come up with your own stories. It may, your sort of book may be like something else a little bit. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that you can't see my main book project, not my only one, but my main book project is a fictitious Greek epic, a really long one. It's going to be the longest epic in the world. Anyway, it's called the Myriad, which is a double play on the word myriad. Because myriad means what? Lots and lots of things, right? Many, many, many things. Many, many pages, many, many words, much story. It is also the main character is named Mirion, who is a king of Orchomenos. Orchomenos is in um, Orchomenos is in Boeotia. It's near Thebes. Thebes is by far the more famous city in Boeotia, where all these people like Hercules was from. Dionysus was born there, and it was his city. His mother lived there. His father was Zeus. She was killed by him as a thunderbolt. But anyways, it was the city of Dionysus. The Bacchae is about him coming back. Okay, it's the city of Hercules. Orchomenos has always been a rival. Orchomenos is I don't know who started Thebes. I guess it was Cadmus, but in mythology they say that the Minions, who are people from Minions, Minyan, came from Thessaly or Thessalia, Thessalia. I think it's Thessalia in Greek. Correct me if I'm wrong. Thessalia, and they are minions, and they were people from there up where Iolcos is, which is where Jason was from. In ancient times, it was called Iolus. So the Iolian people, Aeolian, sometimes called Aeolian or Aeolian, Aeolian in English. In ancient Greek, was called Iolus after their founder, Iolus, Iolus, or Iolos, well, OS. It was IS, the land of Iolos. So they migrated south to Boeotia, and there they founded a city. Well, they migrated all kinds of places, especially northwestern Greece, and went down from Caledon, which is Caledon is in northwestern Greece, northwest part of the Gulf of Corinth. Acarnarnia is over there. Anyways, they came down. They found Boeotia, and there's a lake there. It's called Lake Copias. Built a city there. It was some kind of drain, I think, under the city. It's near a swamp. Always a good place to build your city, like Swamp Castle. But anyways, that's where it was. Um, my epic, the main character who starts this expedition is the wisest king on earth. Well, he has that reputation. His name is Mirion. So we have Myriad, but it's a double play. So, anyways, going way back again, you can write a book. I'm not saying don't write, just make up your entire different genre book, or you could write a book that's like something or is about something. Why would you want to write a book about nothing? It's got to have something to do with something else which already exists, right? It's not, your book's not a self-contained entity. It could be about anything. Anyhow, But even though it is an epic form, it's a voyage around the world, I came up with the story. And it uses it uses the Fountain of Youth story, but it's also he's looking for an artifact, and that's the sacred books, or the Sibylline books, the Golden books. They're sacred books that were stolen. This powerful artifact would allow the person who finds them to have powerful magic, sorcery, where they could use it for good. The land could flourish, and Mirion could be an even greater king. That's the point. I came up with that. It may be like other things that exist, but it should be if I'm going to write an epic that is in this tradition. Okay. Now, I was saying you can write something like something, but don't let my don't let my suggestion that you can use another story like Chaucer's setup to do your book. Don't let that go to your head. You could do it once, but for God's sakes, don't like do it every time. Come up with some of your own, mostly your own ideas. But but this is something people do all the time. Why? Because they couldn't come up with something cooler. If you're asking me. Or when people start writing, especially, they do it more. Like my first book was Siberia, which I took a lot of elements from the Dune series. Now, Dune is still a really different book than Siberia. It's very different in tone, but there are like the main character becomes an emperor. It's on a harsh planet. These things are alike, and you do this imitation a little bit when you're starting, but you get better and better over time. But let's close with the Canterbury Tales. I always thought that the Canterbury Cathedral was a very nice cathedral, but I like the medieval architecture anyway. I like most of it. The Gothic, meaning I like the Gothic cathedrals specifically, but the ones in England are very interesting. And the what's called the perpendicular Gothic, which is that have these fan vaults that are very intricate, very interesting looking version of it, especially when you mostly know the Gothic from France, or they even have the flamboyant Gothic in France, but it's different than the French one. And the English architects were very creative in the Middle Ages. They made some very nice churches. And no, I am not going to talk about the Pillars of the Earth right now, but maybe someday we'll get to some historical novels. I don't read a lot of them because a lot of times I've read original stuff like this. So pick up a Chaucer and go to town. And don't be intimidated by the Middle English. You'll learn.